Should you write a book? Why would you even think about writing a book? Or how can I write a book? Today, that's what we're going to talk about. So excited for this podcast and YouTube. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Hey, Mike Acker here, and I'm excited to jump into my show, Advance with Mike Acker. Really, my show is for you. So if you ever have an idea that you want me to cover, feel free to send it in. Or if you want me to interview someone, feel free to send me that recommendation. We'll love it. What ultimately I do is a no-edit, one-shot show. So it's a great way to model for you not being worried about flubs and failures and fillers. It's a great way to encourage you. It's a great way to give you some content. And it doesn't take as much time because you're not going back and back and back and back and back. And we have fun along the way. And sometimes I interview guests and sometimes it's just me. And I'm inviting someone else to do some interviews with me. His name is Ben Cummings. And we're launching a new segment called Masters of Employee Development. So I'm kind of bouncing around because I'm super excited about today's topic. My sister gives me a call the other day and she says, Mike, should I write a book? And I don't even know where she's going with this. I just said, yes, I should. And she laughed and she said, well, okay, I have a coach for my real estate business and she's a very successful realtor, has been for 20 years. And she said, and my coach said that I should write a book. I don't even know what I would write about. Why should I write a book? Well, this is actually a question I get a lot because I've written a book or two or three or four or five and more are coming out. So should you write a book? How do you write a book? What's the whole point of a book? And is this relevant to you at all? It's absolutely relevant. So don't tune to the next one. Even if you think this isn't for me, or maybe you think I've written a book, so it's not for me. Whoever you are among my audience, I would love for you to stay tuned and later on share. If you're not a subscriber already, subscribe because this is going to be a lot of fun as we talk about some of my own process. And then as we go through this, I'm going to give you four main principles, okay? First of all, my story of how I started writing a book. I was about 26 years old and I was a master's program. And as part of the project that we had to do, I started writing down a series of devotional thoughts. I was a pastor at the time. And so I put together all these kind of vignettes, these little stories. When I got done with it, I sent it off to a lot of different traditional publishers. It didn't go anywhere. And then I got busy, disheartened by that, didn't want to spend a lot of time. So I just moved on. Perhaps I'm describing you right here. I didn't know about self-publishing. I didn't know about hybrid publishers. I didn't know that there was anything other than the big, huge publishers that I read books from. This is about 15 years ago. So I moved on. A couple years later, I thought about the same thing. I started writing some, then once again, got caught up. If I'd known what I know now, I would have already been writing books for the last 15 years. So don't wait for the next 15 years before you do this. Then, fast forward to why I eventually did write a book. I was talking to a client, and her name's Rachel Richards. She's been on the show, and she told me about her book success. I asked her how much money she was making from the book, and she said she was making several $100s, up to a couple thousand at the time with her book. And it really varied. And she said it was all a surprise. She had been challenged to do it by reading a book. And so she wrote a book, and now she was challenging me. So I enrolled in self-publishing school. I enrolled in another one, PhD program. I read a couple different books on this. I got some coaches on this. I listened to some podcasts on this. And with Rachel's help, I started writing it. So I really had several thousands and thousands of dollars that I invested in learning how to do this. And really going through the process that Chandler Bolt writes about and published in his program. And then working through all this whole thing, I started putting it all together. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually already a pretty good writer. I didn't realize that I was just not a normal person. I'd actually been writing sermons for 15 years. And so I'd been writing a whole bunch. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. But I wrote every single day for a minimum an hour, maximum maybe 6-7 hours. And I would just write on my book. And one day we even shipped our son off to my grandpa's house. That sounds bad. It was awesome. He had fun. They had fun. And I wrote for hours while my wife got to relax and hang out and really enjoy herself without a little kid running around the house for part of the day. And so after 27 days, I had the rough draft. I had the rough draft of this book right here. Now, part of my agreement with Rachel was I was coaching her in public speaking, and she would do some work with me on the book. So she content edited the book, and she said, Mike, this is a fantastic book. The world needs this book. And then she tore it apart in the content edit. And I got back her edits and I was like, oh, this book is worthless. It's meaningless. It's stupid. I'm stupid. And all of those thoughts. And then I started working on the content and I put it together, finalized it, went through the copy edit, and then went through the whole process that self-publishing school lies out for you. It was a lot of work. I spent at least 1 hour a day putting together the book, managing the whole process. I think if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So I invested time into it. In addition to the money I paid for the program and the money I paid for other programs, I spent a couple $1,000s on getting together all the different things for the audiobook and the multiple different channels of distribution and on and on and on. Then, with all that money invested, with all that time invested, published it, and I went berserk. I reached out to every single person I knew and I said, please read my book and give me an honest review. Please read my book and give me an honest review. And some of the honest reviews from friends were not so nice. And some of them were fantastic. Majority of them were fantastic. Then I spent a lot of money on promotion. The book got out there and boom, it hit it. Now, 2 years later, just under 2 years later, it is the highest ranking book on public speaking in the terms of overcoming fear of speaking in the world. Now, there's other books that are higher ranked in just public speaking. There's about 7 of them, but mine is the 7th, 8th highest rated book in the world on public speaking and highest ranked on overcoming fear of speaking. So I've learned a lot about this. And after I wrote that book, while I was flying a lot for my job, I penned out some ideas that was going to be just something that was something I gave away, but it turned out to be 20,000 words. And I turned it into my second book, Right to Speak. I'm holding it up on my YouTube channel. So just imagine me holding up a yellow book if you're listening to the podcast. Then when the pandemic was just coming around, I was sitting together with a friend named Steve Gutzer before they closed down restaurants in the Seattle area. And he said, tell me about this book writing process. I said, let's absolutely talk about it. And then we came up with an idea. And then when quarantine hit, we wrote the book in quarantine, wrote it together. And at that same time, I took those old thoughts I had written down when I was 26 and finally released them as a book. So I've published 4 books and my 5th book comes out in June, as well as a workbook for Speak With No Fear. And then I have another book called Prepare to Speak that's launching, and then another one that I'm working on for August. So I got a lot of books. And I've helped other people as well. So should you write a book? And what can you learn from my journey? I really hope that this sparks some thoughts and you would just reach out to me and you would just put some comments on right here. Feel free to follow me, reach out to me, set up a consultation call. Would love for you to have a chance to process some of this. But my sister asked me, so I'm going to pretend you're my sister. And instead of this being just a leadership and communication, I'm going to present it as me thinking through questions that you may have asked and me speaking back to you. And I'm also going to share the 4 different things I shared with my sister with you. You ready for this? All right. Why should you write a book in the first place? The first one is to share your idea, to share your expertise, to share your story. So the first one is to share. My sister, she's an expert at real estate. She really is quite fantastic. I have this just utmost respect for my sister. She has 6 kids, been married to the same man for, oh my gosh, I don't know, 25 years or something since she was 18. Crazy. And she's just done fantastic with her life in so many areas. Does that mean she's a perfect human being? No, she is not. Ayana, you are not the perfect human being, but you are awesome and I love you and you're my sister. And you have a great amount of expertise. So if you tune in, let me just say to you, you're pretty cool and I love you. I'm glad you're my sister. If you're listening to that, just put that aside, the little family moment right there. All right. You have a story or you have an expertise or you have an idea. So your writing a book is a chance to get it out there. It's a greater platform for it. It may never go past 50 people, but that's 50 people that wouldn't have heard it otherwise. And you might become the next Simon Sinek who has an idea and it just boom, takes off. And now all of a sudden you're a person who's really bringing all kinds of awareness to people everywhere. You might be a person like me who now my book sold over 20,000 copies, which is a pretty big deal. It's one of the benchmarks, 10,000. So I'm going now towards the next benchmark. It's pretty cool to share this idea and to share a story. So my dad reaches out to me and he's talking to me and he says, Mike, what about this idea? I got this book I've written. He wrote this about 15 years ago. Pretty cool. Pirates, Scoundrels, and Saints. So this is a story. And it's based on some of the different things he has gone through in life. And he's a fascinating person. He may or may not have been a drug smuggler at one point in time and then became a lawyer and a pilot and all kinds of stuff. So he writes a story about it. It's really, really interesting. And so he partnered with Advantage Publishing and he got his story out. So that's pretty cool. So you got a story, you got an idea, you have a memory, and you want to share it. Is that you? Do you have something you want to share? Write a book because you get to share your story. You get to share it with others. Now we'll come on how that goes beyond just right now. We'll come on to that in the fourth point. Here's the second one. Why should you write a book? Because you build your business or you extend your influence. So you're establishing ultimately more of this extension of who you are and what you do. So recently, my friend Troy Jones, he just published a book. It comes out next week. And that's pretty darn exciting. Or I guess a week before whatever. You know what I mean? He's got this book. It's coming out and it's pretty darn exciting. And that's awesome. He's extending his influence. So as a pastor, he's got 5,000 people he influences on a weekly basis and more than that who don't show up every week, and especially during pandemic. But now with a book, he's going to extend his influence. So it takes his influence and it takes it beyond where he currently is. So your book extends your influence or it builds your business. For example, bring Dr. Kelly Henry to you right here. Dr. Kelly Henry was actually on my show. So I got one of his books. He also went with Advantage Publishing and he took his ideas of customer service and he put it out there for the world. And I absolutely love what he did. He said, Mike, it's not so much that I'm concerned with my book being a bestseller, but for me, this is part of my business. It's an expensive business card. Now, obviously, he hopes it's more than just a business card, but he does want to share his ideas, his expertise, but he also wants to really get himself out there. So building your brand, building your business or extending your influence can be done through a book. This is why I told my sister, you should do this. This extends your business. In fact, maybe you had a client who ended up not going with you, but if they had your book, maybe they would have. You do a first consultation, you do a first meeting, they end up not buying a house then. A couple of years later, they're thinking about buying a house. They still have your book. See, when you give someone a business card, where does it go? In the circular filing cabinet known as the trash. But when you give them a book, nobody throws away a book. So I carry books with me wherever I go and I give it to them. And then sometimes people come back to me and they're like, Mike, that was great. Thank you so much for that. It was interesting. And it's building my business. It's extending my influence. That's what you get to do with your book. So do you have an influence as a realtor, as whatever expertise that you have? You want to extend it? You want to build your brand? That's a great way. Build your business. That's a great way to do it. I keep on saying brand, so nix that out of your mind because we're coming to that in the third point right here. You establish your brand. So your book says a lot about you. This is why people spend a lot of time thinking through what's going to be inside or working with an expert to think through what's going to be inside. And really working with an expert is huge. A lot of people establish their brand in a poor representation of themselves. So although they might have great content, they self-publish it in a very crappy, awful way. And so it doesn't look very professional. It doesn't look great. And as a result, people don't think greatly of them because, hey, this is a mom and pop established, self-published company and they charge me a lot of money for it, but it still looks junk, or I did it myself and it still looks junk, and that's not going to go anywhere. So you want your book to be a good extension, a good representation of your ideas. Now let's go back to my cover right here. If you've ever seen my cover, it's orange with black. I never liked that orange color. I didn't feel like it represented me. But as I've gone out there and really worked on it, I've embraced that color and thought, actually, I do want to put myself out there. I do have the audacity to be noticed among others. I will go for it. So orange, I've adopted. Just like my graphic designer went with a color that I originally didn't really want and kind of bucked against, I've actually now gravitated towards it, even turning mikeacker.com into a orange themed website. And so now it's become something I've really embraced. And really, that brand right there, establishing this, hey, broad aspect of who I am, bold aspect of who I am out there, get your attention type person. And really the establishing the brand of my book and myself, they've become synonymous in some ways. So your book establishes your brand. It tells people more about you. Think about it this way. If you're starting a business, and this is a little bit different nowadays because online is such a legitimate way of working, but if you were establishing a business 30 years ago and you didn't have a brick and mortar building, you weren't really a business. All of a sudden, when a person said, I got a rental space or I bought land, then you're like, bam, now you're a business. That's amazing. Wow, you did that and established your presence, that you were here to stay. So when you write your book and publish your book, it establishes you. It's an incredible way for you to just say, I'm here to stay. My ideas are here to stay. I love that I got to interview this guy right here, Dr. Christopher Brown, a couple weeks ago. He wrote this. Now he's doing all of these with this book. He's sharing his expertise. He is a premier thought leader on really preparation for kindergarten and kindergarten. So he's establishing that. He's sharing that idea. He's extending his influence beyond just the University of Austin where he teaches. And he's establishing his brand that, hey, I am right with this material. Equate my name with an expert on this topic. And so it really establishes him in a full other way. And then the last area that I told my sister is that really, Ayana, when you publish a book, you're going to leave a legacy. So I encouraged her to go for it and really do it. And she said, Mike, I don't write. And I said, that's okay. And going back to my story, remember I found out I was a good writer and not everybody was? Well, my sister, she doesn't write all the time. She doesn't want to write all the time. It's not the best use of her time. And she has marketing money set aside for her business. So I said, use the marketing money for this. Hire a ghostwriter. Advantage Publishing has some of these. Other people have these. There's some great people. Love to talk to you about that. I have a couple different people that I could recommend that I've referred other people to. Although I write my own books, I do get them developmentally edited significantly nowadays. At first I didn't, and I realized I was missing out. So now I have somebody who really helps me communicate my idea. And so I even put together my book recently, and my editor's like, no, Mike, don't do it like that. Don't do it like that. Do it like this. And I rebutted it. And then after I finished it, I went back and like, actually, you're right. And so I had an expert who on their tax return, it says writer, who I'm consulting with and who's helping me out. And I said, Ayana, you at least need that, if not someone to ghostwrite. Well, is ghostwriting really writing a book? Yes, you're the author, they're the writer. So they're like, think about this. It's you coming up with the concept of your house, but an architect putting in where the beams go. You designed the house, but then they drafted the house. You came up with a picture of what's going to look like and the content, but they're actually putting in the actual words of it. So my sister said, oh, okay, I get that. And a lot of people that you would say, I love their book, were ghostwritten. So their ideas, their story, but someone with the uniqueness of writing. That way, they're able to leave the legacy in the way they want. They're able to share the ideas in the way they want. They're able to build your brand. So there's both. You can write it yourself. You can developmentally edit it with and write it like I do, or you can ghostwrite it all the way. Whatever you do, you're sharing your idea, you're building your business, you're extending your influence, you're establishing your brand, and you leave your legacy. Remember that book about my dad? Half the characters in the book are my dad. Someday, my dad will no longer be with me, hopefully in 20 years or so. He's only 40 right now. I'm just kidding. He's 72. So in 20 years, he'll be ready to say, you know what? I'm looking at the last few years of my life. But no matter how long my dad lives, I got the memory of what he left behind. And that's the incredible thing about written words. My mom left behind a journal, and when she died in a car accident, I still have the journal. And I have these books that whenever I pass away, my descendants, they get to have this. And the stories I tell are going to outlive me on page. Even though they're in the form of a business book, they outlive my life here. So those are some ideas that I gave to my sister, and hopefully they're helpful to you. I would love to chat with you about it. You can easily find me at mike.acker@stepstoadvance.com. There's a whole bunch of links down below that you can find as well in the show notes of the podcast or in the notes of the YouTube. Until next time, make sure that you subscribe. Check out some of the stuff that I'm talking about, some of these authors I write about or mentioned here, and you can find them all down below in the notes. I'll make sure that all these books are listed. Have an incredible day. Make sure you share this with somebody else, and we'll see you in the next show.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.